How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about 30 Days of Night Volume 1. This is written by Steve Niles with art by Ben Templesmith and was put out by IDW with their classic little light bulb logo, the light bulb with the eye in it. I like it way better than the new one, which is just IDW. But anyway, this one, a lot of people know, is where you get this town in Alaska. It's so far up north. I think they say it's the farthest north city anywhere on the world. And in turn, they get 30 days where the sun doesn't rise at all. 30 days of night. And because of their isolation and the basically month without sun, a group of vampires see this as an opportunity to wreak some havoc, where they're much less weak than they normally are, and they can just absolutely wreck this town. And you get a group of survivors. There's these two sheriffs, a man and his wife. They're actually happily married in this version of the story, and they have to figure out how to survive with, a whole month ahead of them of destruction. And it is very much a classic horror comic. Very good, very gruesome, very gory. And I do really like how the vampires are depicted. Very pale, and the art style in this book where everything's sketchy, very Nosferatu, but then you get things more along like action vampires and modern creepy vampires, like they'll have really big tongues and they'll be super strong and they can just rip humans to pieces. So very creepy creatures. And I guess I should also talk about that art. The art might be a little bit divisive in this one because it is so loose and so sketchy. It gets very abstract, but it also stays very gruesome. I feel the flaw with a lot of horror books is they get very clean and standard art, and it's horror art. It shouldn't be clean and it shouldn't be standard. It should be wild and crazy. So I do really like that that's what this one does, and a lot of it looks really cool. But that being said, it can get a little too abstract at times, where there are definitely a few panels every now and then where you're like, what the heck even happened here? But then again, it's also Alaska in the middle of snow in the dead of winter. I think atmospherically, if you were there in real life, a few things would be hard to see. But I'll show you guys the art and you can kind of gauge that from there. But I really do like it, even though I know it can get a little too weird at times. But another thing that should be talked about with this book is Volume 1 of 30 Days of Night, the original short story, is only 3 issues long. And yeah, it's a lot shorter than you think it is. And in turn, it's written like a short story instead of written like a novel. So things like the early survival, the vampires show up, they make a mess, and then we kind of cut to the small group of survivors hunkered down, so you don't get to see, like, play-by-play of what they're trying to do. It's more about the concept in big strokes, and in turn, things like the initial group, how did they survive, that's not really in here. And I think the movie, does more of the play-by-play better. But here we're focused on being a short story, getting the broad strokes, so it is very short. But that being said, when it gets moving, when it gets towards the end, after the initial vampire bloodbath, you read through it really fast. Tons of great, crazy stuff in here. And for a 3-issue miniseries, really cool, and I do want to get to reading the rest of the comics soon. The idea that 30 Days of Night started out as a 3-issue miniseries, then got so popular, there's, I think, about a dozen books out now. I really do find that kind of interesting, so I do want to be reading more of these. This was really cool, and I'll try to move on to, Dark Days. Yeah, I'll be moving on to Dark Days pretty soon, because yeah, I had a good time with this, and I definitely would recommend checking it out. Just bear in mind that it is shorter, and bear in mind the art isn't going to be for everybody, but gruesome, gory vampires wreaking havoc in small-town Alaska is just great, you know? Anyway, if you want to hear me talk about the story in more detail, see some of the art, hear me talk about a few of the plot points, I'm going to switch to the close-up camera and we can take a closer look at this release. So, to the close-up camera. Alright, here we are inside the castle taking a closer look at 30 Days of Night. And overall, I really do love this cover. It is a vampire with almost a Joker-esque stitching around the mouth. And then you get these sharp teeth and smeared with red. And you get these two creepy little eyes, and you see the tiny, tiny red dot for the pupil. But it's an extreme close-up where it's cutting out most of the face. You just basically see the teeth, but with enough of the face above it to know that it's staring at you. And it actually does have where the gloss ends right here, and the 30 Days of Night logo is also embossed. That's pretty cool. The top with the now a major motion picture banner is a little distracting and does take a little bit away from it, but if you're made into a movie, you tell people you were made into a movie. A few things, though, with Volume 1 is those creepy faces, the extreme close-ups, do continue, and then we get this one, number 4, which isn't as extreme of a close-up, but it's kind of somewhere in the middle, and then they just give up on the gag. And I'm like, ah, man, I loved having the first 3 where they match so well in the set, and then they gave up on it. But also, the volumes, why they do have the volume number up here, for whatever reason, 30 Days of Night would go on to be more known by the individual titles than the volume number. So when you're talking about Part 1, you have to kind of say Volume 1, even though people don't tend to refer to volume numbers too well with these. Also on the back, classic IDW logo, and $17.99. That is a pretty crazy price when you consider that this is 3 issues long. I mean, it was a movie, it was in high demand, and I see this all the time at the used bookstore, so I know it sold well. But man, $17.99 for 3 issues, that is a crazy price. And if you see how thick it is, and you're like, how is that only 3 issues? Well, the book ends, and then it has extended trailers in the back for volumes 2 and 3. So a large part of the pages at the end are just previews for the next 30 Days of Night. So yeah, there's the one for volume 2, and you can see that they're getting a fair bit at the end that's just previews. But that being said, you know, you had a 3-issue limited series that got popular. Kind of, what the heck are we supposed to do moment there, you know? Anyway, we open it up. Title page. Glue is a little loose on this one. I bought it used. It saved me a ton of money, not paying $17.99 for this. But we also get an introduction, Cold Blood, from Clive Barker there, and he talks about how he was friends with Steve for a while, and it felt like this was, you know, a really classic horror movie, he says, you know, where it'd come up with a crazy concept and really push it, you know, 30 days with no sunlight, and there's the credits over here. But yeah, good to hear from Clive Barker. Anyway, after that, we jump into the story proper. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers. I do want to say my piece on a few plot points and make sure you have a basic idea of what the story's about, but I'm not going to be covering how it ends. But I do want to show you guys the book, show you guys some of the art, and talk a little bit about what happens. Anyway, without further ado, we get the town of Barrow, and I do love these leading in panels where you can see how deserted it is from November 17th, 2001, and they talk about how not much happens. Every now and then someone gets a little rough, but today the police are out because there's a series of strange robberies. A bunch of the phones have gone missing, and the sheriff meets up with his wife who has found them, and for whatever reason they're all burned. what is this, some kind of prank? What's going on here? But you can see little signs the town is being prepared for these vampires. Anyway, the sheriff gets talked into spending the last few hours of sunlight with his wife and watching the sun go down together in kind of a sweet moment. That is one thing with the comic, is they do have such a sweet relationship, and in the movie to see them fighting and like, what are they, getting a divorce? That was really kind of a sad thing, you know? Sad translation. Anyway, after that we get the first of a few of these quick little New Orleans pages, and basically the vampires are keeping them on the down low. Like, no one knows that vampires are real except for a few people, and they're trying to get video evidence of the vampires, and they're reading these emails, and they're going to find out about Barrow and try to go and get some evidence. Now, that being said, I get what they're trying to do, and it does end up in this interesting scene, but jumping to New Orleans and then having, like, you know, all these, you know, really warm scenes, it does kind of affect the pacing a little bit, you know? And you know, you get me out of the frozen cold. It's a little distracting, you know? So I'm not 100% on those scenes. But anyway, there's the sheriff and his wife watching the sun go down together, and that's last light. Now, after that, there's a man in the local diner, I would say bar, but he's asking for liquor and raw meat, and they say that liquor's actually illegal up here. I didn't know there were places in America where liquor was still illegal, but basically they say Alaska is too dangerous and you have to stay sober. But this guy causes a ruckus, and they lock him up in the local jail, but he's the guy who's been preparing everything, the vampire's assistant, if you will. And when it gets time, he actually uses his enhanced strength to break out of jail, but because he's not a vampire, he's taken down by the cops, and we do get this moment where they're like, is he dead? And then the wife shoots him a bunch of times, and they're like, he's dead now. So, man, they play it pretty rough in Alaska. But of course, their communication relay is exploded, and now it's nighttime, and they have no communication with the outside world, and they know something's up, which is where we get this big sort of anthology kind of. They see the vampires coming, this sort of hazy group of people, and the vampires kind of, you know, they go on their big killing spree, and, you know, showing it through a series. Oh man, this is a good panel. Look at that art there. But anyway, they show it through a series of just, you know, crazy, insane moments. And, you know, if this was a longer thing, I would like to see more specifically how the early people survived the initial attacks. But we do eventually jump to them later, and, you know, it's just sort of the opening just told through a series of crazy events. Like, yeah, this guy tries to drive away in his car, and a vampire gets him, and then there's the car on fire. But yeah, it eventually ends with you see, oh man, you know, I said about the art, it can get a little abstract, but man, look at some of these cool pages. But anyway, getting distracted. It leads to us meeting our main characters again, and when we pick up again with the sheriff and his wife, they're hiding in this little hole. They said that the vampires didn't look there because it was like an old out-of-use furnace, and it's a good place to hide, but there's not enough food, and they don't know how long they can survive in there. And then we get, you know, like I said, it's not told super play-by-play, but you do get a little bit of that, you know, almost Walking Dead style. Should we stay or should we go? Should we try to fight? Well, we don't know what kills them. And, you know, this is one where vampires are a lot harder to kill. And we do get a scene where the sheriff has to sneak out for food, and he's like, move, stop, look, listen, repeat. And you do get that kind of system, you know, where it's like this is what you got to do. You know, take little steps, try to hide, advance slowly, and even still the vampires might come across you. So I do kind of wish, you know, if this was longer, we could have got more of that play-by-play. We could have seen more of the vampires in their system and how the heroes survive in their system. But like I said, this is told like a short story and not like a novel, so it's getting the big brushstrokes. It's getting, this is happening, that's happening, where, you know, moving through big major events, but we're not going to stop and tell every little thing. And, you know, I do wish it was told differently, but at the same time, you know, it's a mini-series. That's what mini-series do. But overall, really great, crazy, grungy artwork. Lots of that insane vampire action, blood everywhere. So, you know, it is short, and sometimes the art gets too abstract. But overall, really just a great, gruesome horror comic experience. And I really can't wait to read the next couple volumes. I already have the first 3, and I'm going to try to get to them pretty quick. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my horror comics playlist. If you want to see what else I've talked about as far as horror comics go, I've talked about a few things. You know, Jeff Lemire's Gideon Falls. I talked about that one, and his new one, The Passageway. And I've talked about like some old Tales from the Crypt and stuff. Well, actually, more of the reboot of Tales. But anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.